So, while there's no new fight announcements for the card in Lincoln 2 weeks from today, gotta address and have to point out that following the subsequent removal of Antonio Braga Neto, which I mentioned on my last episode, and if those that are listening to this, I would have to imagine you're pretty well versed in the MMA newsosphere. You already knew that Marcus Perez filled in. So after that happened, and coincidentally, after someone not named Demetrius Johnson has the flyweight belt, looky here, we have our first flyweight fight on a main card outside of last week's Johnson Cejudo fight, title fight, of the entire year. It took almost 9 months for a non-125-pound title fight to make a main card. Do we think that that is a coincidence? If you don't think that's a coincidence, try again, my friend. That is exactly why that happened. There's interest in this division again. There is something, it's obvious, it's arguably as hot of a topic as it was when it was first announced with a 4-man tournament and Ian McCall and Demetrius Johnson fought to a draw. It's there, man. It's there, and I don't think it's going anywhere, especially if Henry Cejudo wins that third fight. Please, UFC, make that fight. Then I guarantee you that's how people get into it. I'm not saying that's what I'm rooting for. Don't really care. I'm objective about it. But anyway. All right. So now, bang for these new fight announcements. UFC 228, September 8th in Dallas, got 2 welterweight bouts, 2 awesome welterweight bouts. How about Diego Sanchez? Ultimate Fighter Season 1 winner Diego Sanchez, still going strong. He will take on the Welshman Craig White, who was just last seen on May 27th as a short notice replacement in the co-main event against Neil Magny in Liverpool. Craig White will get a second opportunity in the UFC against a legend in his own right, Diego Sanchez, who has, I think Diego Sanchez has lost his last 2, if not his last 3. He'll probably be an underdog in that fight. He's going to be undersized. And then another welterweight, absolute cracker of a fight. Both of these guys have won their last 2, and both of these guys have won those last 2 fights by way of finish. Nico, the motherfucking hybrid Price, against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, who was coming off 2 consecutive KOs of Sabaho Masi, the second one being a lot more convincing. That's a hell of a welterweight fight between 2 up-and-coming prospects that are both going to be surely top 15 contenders if their potential sees their ceiling. Nico Price gets the edge in creativity. Al Hassan probably has the edge in as far as raw power in his hands is concerned. That's a fight that I promise you need to not be sleeping on. That one's going to be fireworks. Moving on for the week after the UFC's debut in Russia, UFC Fight Night 136 in Moscow, Douglas Silva de Andrade unfortunately has pulled out of his contest with surging and quick rising bantamweight contender Petr Yan, and Petr Yan is in need of a new opponent, and something tells me that they're going to either have tremendous amounts of difficulty getting that new opponent and or he's not going to get one. If you are at 135 pounds and you want to take a fight against a guy like Petr Yan in his home country, good luck with that, buddy. Like I said, I would not be surprised if they don't find a fight for him in time. And then they just keep throwing Cajun Johnson to the wolves. He must be in desperate need of some money. Cajun Johnson directly, literally, not even now, 2 weeks to the day removed of his first round submission loss to another Russian stud, Islam Makhachev. He's booked against a different Russian stud, Rustam Khabilov, 22-3 in the UFC, 22-3 as a pro, 8-2 in the UFC. I would imagine Khabilov will be a massive favorite in that one as well. Maybe Cajun Johnson should just keep his mouth shut. As far as talking about the UFC and bashing the UFC and bashing Dana White goes, Islam Makhachev and Rustam Khabilov in back-to-back fights. Jeez, man. UFC Fight Night 137 in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the week after. It was announced on the Contender Series that Mark Godbeer, this was the very first fight that scratched the surface on this card. It was Mark Godbeer and Luis Enrique, both making their light heavyweight debuts. Godbeer is now out of that fight, and in steps in another Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series contract winner from this summer, and Ryan Superman Spann. So Ryan Spann will take on Enrique, and will go to hear the who famojes in Enrique's favor for his debut. The monster that will become UFC 229, as I previously stated, could end up becoming the all-time leader in pay-per-view buys, is starting to take shape now with obviously Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov at the forefront and where all of the eyes will be. It definitely makes a lot of sense to not book another title fight and save them for other cards and to maximize those other cards' potential rather than, you know, loading up an undercard of Conor McGregor's with stars, which you know, like I said, wouldn't make sense as far as boosting the potential of other cards, and B, would not make Conor too happy. For those that know anything about Conor McGregor, he does not like big stars on his undercards. That being said, the co-main event for what is consensusly being hyped up as the future pay-per-view king in UFC history, UFC 229, that's October 6th from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. The co-main event for that card, it's still not official, but it's been verbally agreed to for quite a few days now, will be another chance for Derek Lewis to try to get some shine in a co-main event in Las Vegas. It all sounds too familiar, and I don't even want to think about his fight with Ngannou. Nonetheless, Derek Lewis gets called out by Alexander Volkov to fight him in Russia. He says no can do, and now they have a date in the co-main bill, and Vegas as the second up from the top from what is the biggest the biggest UFC fight arguably ever. A few other good fights on that card. A really, really interesting light heavyweight bout between Ovin St. Preux and Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes, widely considered the best prospect at 205. He's 3-0 in the UFC with 3 first-round finishes and 12-0 with 12 finishes and 11 of them coming in the first round in his career. Women's strawweight action, 7th-ranked Michelle Waterson will take on 8th-ranked Felice Herrig. Yana Kunitskaya returns to the same arena where she saw her title shot and title hopes dashed against Cyborg in March. She'll drop back down to 135 pounds to take on Lena Landsberg. And a very, very overlooked, I can foresee already, and what will be an overlooked welterweight scrap between Ryan LaFleur and Tony Martin. That all of those fights will be on the undercard of one Khabib and Conor McGregor. Then the UFC takes 3 weeks off and lands in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada. As I said, you know, there's just been so many fights getting announced, and this card was kind of at the forefront of new fight announcements. That card's headlined by Volkan Ozdemir and surging light heavyweight contender Anthony Smith, and that card got to its name this week. Women's bantamweights, in my opinion, this fight could be a fight for their jobs. I could definitely see, especially in the case of the latter, the loser being given their walking papers, and the latter being out of the two, number 14, Sarah Morris and Talita Bernardo. Could definitely see Bernardo getting the boot. If she loses this fight, she would become 0-3 in the UFC and 5-4 as a pro. Light heavyweights, number 10, Misha Serkinov, and number 13, Patrick Cummins, as well as light heavyweights, Jean Vellante and Ed Herman. At bantamweight, Andre Sukumtad gets a chance to redeem himself in his first fight since the mental errors against Sean O'Malley, and he takes on one of the most, or it seems like it was a long time ago, but he was once considered one of the top prospects in Canadian MMA, and he's dropping to bantamweight. That is Gavin Tucker, Sukumtat and Gavin Tucker. Nasrat Haqparast, who impressed a lot of people in Germany, gets a quick turnaround against Tibal Guti. How Tibal Guti at 1-4 still has a job in the UFC, I'm not sure. And then a really interesting welterweight fight between two talented 170ers looking to get back on track. Nordine Taleb will take on Sean Strickland. And then the week after that would be Madison Square Garden. There's no new fights announced for that. Everyone is on the edge of their seat to see what the main event for that will be, being that that is the only fight up until November 10th. The only card put on by the UFC up to November 10th that has not had its main event revealed. And then fast forward a week to that aforementioned 25th anniversary card in Denver, UFC Fight Night 139. That's headlined by Frankie Edgar and the Korean zombie Chan Sung Jung. That being said, sorry, got a little distracted there. That being said, a fight that was initially booked for the Khabib McGregor undercard and got moved, wonder why. A top 5 flyweight tilt between Joseph Benavidez and Ray Borg. Here's an interesting one. Women's bantamweight, and you will not hear me very often say anything with interesting and women's bantamweight in the same sentence. But a couple of fighters that I'm intrigued to see how they will react and or bounce back to recent adversity. That is Raquel Pennington and Jermaine Durandamy. They will meet on that card, as well as a couple of strawweight tilts. The latest Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series contract winner, and a girl who is very ambitious and has, I believe they said on the Contender Series, this fighter, Macy Barber, has a timer set in her phone that tells her how much longer she has to break John Jones' record as the youngest UFC champion ever. I'm definitely not one to be a Debbie Downer on someone's dreams, but I mean, with the way the UFC is operated today and who gets title shots and who doesn't, that seems very far-fetched. However, she will take on Maya Stevenson in her UFC debut on November 10th. In addition to that, another fight that I would consider, at least it has to be for me, I don't see any other way around it, a fight to avoid getting those walking papers between the two victims in the UFC of Mackenzie Dern, that being Ashley Yoder and Amanda Bobby Cooper. With Ashley Yoder being 0-3 in the UFC and Amanda Bobby Cooper being 3-4 collectively as a professional. Granted, those 4 losses came to Cynthia Calvillo, Tatiana Suarez, Dern, and someone else that's almost undefeated. You got to imagine dropping to 3-5 as a pro will probably get you the boot. So that being said, that fight's in. Also, outside of the UFC, Bellator welterweight Grand Prix matchups were announced. Man, is this going to be fucking fun. A Bellator welterweight Grand Prix. I said if they were going to do another Grand Prix, it would either need to be at welterweight or at featherweight. Those two divisions at Bellator are absolutely loaded. Check out these matchups. Obviously, one we already know is the trilogy, the head of the trilogy between Douglas Lima and Andrei Koreshkov. Everyone's going to be interested to see how Douglas Lima will come back after losing his belt to McDonald. That'll be on Bellator's debut on DAZN, September 29th. And then the rest of them don't have dates yet. But the one that everyone for sure was hoping would be a part of the list, holy shit, we're going to get Paul Daly versus Michael Venom Page. Oh, man. Is that the most exciting fight in the world of MMA outside of the UFC? I really think that it could be. That is a hell of a fight that's going to make some local Brits happy for sure. And then that's on the left side of the bracket. So you got Lima, Koreshkov, Paul Daly, and MVP on that side of the bracket. Any which way of fights that would be made for the semifinals, I would be thrilled with. And then on the right side, So a lot of people's question was if Rory McDonald was going to enter this tournament, not only if he was going to enter this tournament, but will his belt be on the line? Another disclaimer about this tournament, every single fight is 5 rounds. Every single one of them, whether it's a quarterfinal, semifinal, alternate fight, if you are fighting under the distinction of being inside the welterweight Grand Prix above the Bellator banner, you're fighting 5 rounds. That was made clear. So with that being said, Rory McDonald's belt will be on the line, and the guy that will get the guy that will get Rory McDonald's first title defense shot after McDonald takes care of or fails to take care of his business with Gegard Mousasi, that man is John Fitch, former UFC welterweight title challenger John Fitch. I think that's a smart move, especially when it's no secret John Fitch doesn't have the most exciting style. And it's also no secret that Rory McDonald does well against wrestlers. He holds a win over Tyron Woodley, amongst other guys that call themselves wrestlers. So Rory McDonald and John Fitch on that side. And the other fight on that side of the bracket, which is an amazing fight, but very interesting for me, being that the winner of this is now dubbed the quote-unquote #1 contenders fight, even though like it doesn't really matter. The winner of this tournament is going to end up with the belt regardless. And if you win fights in this tournament, you're going to get a shot at that belt regardless. But it was very interesting to me to see the first, from a title shot standpoint and with the belt being on the line standpoint. As far as seeding is concerned, it makes all the sense in the world. How about Neiman Gracie and Ed Ruth? 2 of Bellator's not exactly best kept secrets, but 2 of Bellator's brightest and flashiest prospects, with Gracie being on the ground, obviously coming from the historic Gracie family, and Ed Ruth, just an absolute monster, three-time national champion in wrestling at Penn State. I mean, the fact that someone's O has got to go in that one is incredibly enthralling for me. And then on top of that, the fact that the winner of that fight is going to fight for the belt. Could you imagine Ed Ruth fighting for the belt by the middle of next year? That's crazy, man. That is crazy. And then finally, the alternate fight. This will be 2 guys that will be able to step in case anyone else gets hurt. Lorenz Larkin and Yaroslav Amosov. #1 guy I do not want to see is Yaroslav Amosov. Dude is an animal. 20-0. I'm going to pick him to beat Larkin in that fight too. And of course, what would this segment be if it did not address the lone important Bellator fight announcement this week? And that is Aaron Pico is going to be tested, ladies and gentlemen. Who in a lot of people's minds is the best pound-for-pound prospect in the entire world of MMA, given his attributes and accolades and decorations as a martial artist as a whole. That man is Aaron Pico. And Aaron Pico will get former 135-pound title challenger Leandro Higo in his next fight. I'm excited to see him get tested. Is he probably still leagues ahead of Higo? Yeah. But at least we know now, once he wins this fight, come on, baby. Let's see him against the McKees. Let's see him against the Emmanuel Sanchez's. Let's see him against the Daniel Weichels. He looks ready. If he beats a former title challenger, whether it's at 135 or 145 or wherever, he's ready.